Today, the church celebrates the solemnity of Christ the King. Jesus definitely is the sinner's king. Remember, we also today remember that Jesus Christ is true God and true man, and he lives and reigns. He's the Lord of the universe. Everything that lives is kept in existence only through him. On this feast, we also end the liturgical year. So we begin a new one next week and begin to prepare for Advent and then Christmas. And in this time, I don't know about you, but every disciple of Jesus is going through a great trial. Jesus foretold that we would endure these things for his name's sake, for the truth. And yet there is great meaning in our trials and sufferings. They equate to the purification and salvation of our souls, which is the most important thing. Saints are sinners who are continually being saved by Jesus. These truths are indeed muddled by a pandemic of hedonism we see today. And hedonism is basically seeking out pleasure for pleasure's sake. That's what hedonism is. Modern man, as one person put it, does not want to be saved. He wants to be affirmed. Modern man does not want to be saved. He wants to be affirmed. However, you and I want to be saved. Let's take a look at the two thieves today, for they represent to us the responses to Jesus as the salvation of our souls. As one person put it, quote, "Today, each of us, like the two criminals, is hanging on a cross. We are suffering or troubled in some way, and when we suffer, the first thing we do is try to escape it, or to change it, or distract ourselves from it. Then we experience temptations to try all sorts of ways to alleviate our pain. Christ the King wants us to choose him. Of the two thieves crucified with Christ, only one of them turned to him. The other continued to shout, to curse, to insult, to be perfectly bitter and hateful. Both were in the presence of Jesus. One was saved, the other was lost. What separated one from the other? The good thief saw that he was powerless to change his situation, but he accepted it in a spirit of expiation for his sins and looked to Jesus to save him in the most important way: save my soul. He did not ask to be rescued from his suffering, something to take note of. He asked to be allowed to hope in Jesus. Now, the unrepentant thief, he saw he was powerless and he resented it. Close quote. Christ, our King, has a heart of flesh like yours, says St. Josemaria. He is the author of the universe and of every creature, but he does not lord it over us. He begs us to give him a little love as he silently shows us his wounds. I want to share a modern story of somebody who has integrated the truth of being saved and is content with their life, even in the midst of suffering and limitation. The story is of Mrs. Jones, a 92-year-old lady. This Mrs. Jones lost her husband after 70 years of marriage, and she's there waiting to move into a new room in a nursing home. She is petite. Her hair is moved off to one side fashionably. Her makeup is perfectly applied, even though she's legally blind. After hours of waiting patiently in the lobby of the nursing home, finally she's greeted by a helper who takes her to her room. So she smiled sweetly when she was informed that her room was ready. As Mrs. Jones maneuvered her walker to the elevator, the helper provided a verbal description of her tiny room. She listened, and before the helper finished, she said, "I love it. I love my room." But the helper said, "Mrs. Jones, you haven't even been in there yet. Just wait." And then she responded, "Well, that has nothing to do with it." Then she explained, "Happiness is something you decide on ahead of time. Whether I like my room or not, or how the furniture is arranged in it. It's how I arrange my mind. I have already decided to love it. It is a decision I make every morning when I wake up. I have a choice. I can either spend the day in bed recounting the difficulty I have with the parts of my body that no longer work, or I can get out of bed and be thankful to God for the ones that do. Each day is a gift, she continued. As long as I wake up, I will focus on the new day and all the happy memories that I have stored away just for this time in my life. This is a story of a woman who has won. She has arranged her mind rightly on the truth and on goodness and on beauty. She's like the good thief. The good thief arranged his mind to see who was present in Jesus and didn't just lament his situation, nor did he ask to be rescued from his suffering on the cross next to Jesus. He entrusted himself to Jesus and his kingship and was allowed to hope in Jesus. Let us remember them both in the midst of our crosses, whatever they may be. We all have our crosses, and every vocation has its cross. Let us trust Jesus and the truth of ourselves in his sight. Let us recall to mind. I'm going to close just from with a prayer. Let's make this prayer our own too, from St. John Henry Cardinal Newman. I make myself God's own forever. The salvation of my soul shall be my first concern. With the aid of his grace, I will create in me a deep hatred and sorrow for my past sins. I will try hard to detest sin as much as I have ever loved it. Into God's hands I put myself, not by halves, but unreservedly. I promise you, O Lord, with the help of your grace, to keep out of the way of temptation, to avoid all occasions of sin, to turn at once from the voice of the evil one, to be regular in my prayers, so to die to sin that you may not have died for me on the cross in vain. Amen.